How do I be present with my kids? How do I be present with my wife? Fully there. And I realized it wasn't a problem of like, how do I do it in the moment? It was actually a work problem. A lot of times working harder is the lazy approach because it's just grinding more versus actually getting smart about your work, actually learning how to be a leader, actually delegating. We had men open up and share secrets that they had never shared before with anybody. We create that level of safety where they can get it off their chest and be real in front of other men.
Hey, Jon, welcome to the show.
Hey, man. So good to be here.
Look, I was introduced to you, by so many people, by Qasim Aslam, Hal Elrod. You know, your name kept on popping up, and so did, along with it, Front Row Dads. And I got curious. Oh, is this another men's group? Is this another mastermind? There's a lot around there, you know. A lot of them are good. A lot of them are garbage. I'd heard about your group, only good things. And then I did some digging. And I love the way you explained where you were asked to explain who you were, and you missed out the husband and father.
Yeah.
And you thought to yourself, hang on, that should surely become before everything.
Yes.
Now you're an accomplished author, speaker, but why did Front Row Dads become so important for you to actually lead with that?
Yeah. So this was a moment in my life when I had achieved what I thought was the major goal of my speaking career. I got a $35,000 keynote speech, and I had put out the book, and I thought I was doing exactly what I wanted to do. And this is an important part of the story, is the book was about the power of moment making. And it all started with a charity 20 years ago that helps kids and adults have the event of their dreams in the front row. And it was really a passion project for me. But what I didn't realize was that I was more of a moment maker for the rest of the world than I was for my own family, until my wife called me out on that. And that was my moment when I knew that I needed to flip the script and started paying attention. And that's when the idea of family man with a business, not businessman with a family, really became clear.
And you've launched that. Well, how big is the organization? Because I hear about it absolutely everywhere. And I know we've got to get together next time I'm over in your neck of the woods. But
yes.
How big is the group?
Yeah, in some ways it's very small, and it's grown very organically, one friend bringing in another. So we're 330 guys spread out over about 15 countries, most in the US. And it's specific for entrepreneurs and business owners, and particularly those guys that you and I both know. A lot of these people who we love to talk about our business. We love the projects that we're involved with. We want to show our kids how to go out and make a difference in the world. Those are great things. But oftentimes the family is sacrificed along the way. I mean, even you brought up Hal's name. I remember talking to him about this, and he's like, yeah, we'll have like a 2-hour conversation. And at the end, it might be hey, how's your wife and kids? But it wasn't the root of the conversation. So we just asked ourselves, you know, because we had talked to mentors, guys that have created great success. Not a single, I'm talking like people in their 70s, 80s, they'd been down the road a long ways, and nobody ever looked back and said, I wish I would have made another million. But plenty said, I wish I would have spent more time with my family. And so we just didn't want to be another statistic of people who ignored their family and built epic businesses. We want to do both, you know, win in all areas.
So let's get deep on this. Why are we so shit at it? Because we absolutely know a ton of entrepreneurs that are divorced.
Yes.
Most successful business people out there, you know, Bezos, and there's a lot of these people out there. Elon Musk, divorced. They can't hold a relationship down. And I will openly go on record and say that I made that faux pas of all faux pas. When you're growing your business and it starts being successful, you start going out more. You start going to more networking events. And I remember going to so many events and not being here for that birthday, or missing out on this, or being in a different country until it hit me and I had to make a change. But we think, no, shut up. I'm doing this because I'm supporting the family. I'm doing that because I'm bringing the money in. Don't whine at me because I missed a birthday. I just landed that contract. And then we sit back, and you're right. We realize we're missing out. Why? Why can't we do it when we're younger? Why can't we be smart enough to realize what we're missing?
Hey, I'm sorry for interrupting this podcast. I know it's a brilliant one,
But I wanted to talk to you about your room, your connections. Now, we know full well that great things come from great connections and great rooms. Now, if you're in a room full of people that will challenge you, inspire you, motivate you, and support you, then great. But if not, then maybe I have the solution for you. Head on over to stevedsims.com, look up Sims Distillery there, and join our community of creative disruptors. Those that are only not there to help you and motivate and actually give you information, but to support and answer questions. We very much vet the room to make sure that we support each other's growth. We all want each other to grow. So if you want to be in the right room, head on over to stevedsims.com/Sims Distillery, and I'll see you inside my room. Enjoy the rest of the show.
Yeah, dude. This is what I'm trying to figure out for myself, and by listening to other people. But a lot of it is our identity. Think about this. When you are a young man, you create this identity, this work ethic where this is who you are. You're a powerhouse. And when you get married and you have to change your identity or your priorities, that's hard to do when you've ingrained these principles and these work habits for a decade or longer at times. So if somebody really begins their entrepreneurial path at 20 and they get married at 30, my whole world was built around doing the hardest work first. I remember telling my wife early on in our marriage, I'm like, my best hours of the day are in the morning from here to here. I need to go out and do that for the business and provide. I was also, if I really look inside, I was hiding. Because being a dad was hard. Being around whiny, crying children was hard. I would go to a coffee shop and write my book. I was having a great time providing for my family. But I had to switch that intentionally if I wanted my family to get the best of me. I had to learn how to give them my early morning hours. And then I also needed to be smarter as a business. And you know this really well. It's like a lot of times working harder is the lazy approach because it's just grinding more. Versus actually getting smart about your work, actually learning how to be a leader, actually delegating, actually leveraging your time. That's often trickier, requires more strategy, not just simple hustle. Because and that's how I had to evolve. So men have to shift their identity. They have to hang around a different group of guys that are doing it differently. And in fact, real quick, this summer, my family and I went to Europe for 3 weeks, and I credit the guys I met 5 years ago that have been doing this with their families, and they've, Joey Coleman, Mike Michalowicz, all these guys teaching me how to block my time first and then build a business around it. Every genius business guy that was living a great life where they put their family first had these principles. They just weren't being talked about regularly in my community.
You mentioned some great people there, including Joey. Give him a little slap there. He's a good friend. But I remember waking up one day and looking at my calendar, and my week was solid. It was booked, which, hoorah, that made me a busy professional. And loads of client meetings and loads of shit I didn't want to do with like legal and accountants and tax and patent attorneys. But hey, that's what busy business people are doing. And then I suddenly realized there was none of those bookings in there for my wife.
Yes.
And I don't know what happened. I'm just bloody glad it did. My calendar now is riddled, and it looks stupid, but 1 hour here, breakfast with Claire, 1 hour here. Like yesterday, I booked, like I'm booking a meeting with Elon Musk. I booked a lunch with my son. He's 18 years old. And I went, sandwich, Saturday, 12 till 1. He's like, well, I got there. I'll get 12:30 to 1:30. He's like, done. And I booked an appointment to have a sandwich with my son. And it looks and sounds stupid. But if I'm prepared to book an appointment with my accountant, my legals, my tax attorneys, who I don't really like talking about that subject, who the freaking hell does? You'll book a colonoscopy, but you won't book an appointment with your wife? It just makes no sense.
Yeah. That's exactly it, man. That, if you look at my calendar right now, you'll see Friday lunch with Tatiana. And, I'll tell you something else about scheduling that was really good for me was I was always interested in squeezing in as much as I could into the calendar. And now if I want to be a great dad, I need more space in my calendar, because what I realized was that it wasn't that I was having a hard time engaging at home. Like this is a question I get from everybody. How do I be present with my kids? How do I be present with my wife? Fully there. And I realized it wasn't a problem of like, how do I do it in the moment? It was actually a work problem. I didn't have the right systems in place. I didn't have the right space in my life. I didn't have the right transition time. All of that was the problem. And when I fixed that, I naturally showed up more present to my family. So I had to clear, like Friday, I cleared the schedule, and that became like, how do I close loops? How do I button things up? Because I kept working until 5 on Friday and then just carrying all this work momentum into my family life.
Well, we're going to be looking at you for some answers here, because it's very easy to be a businessman when you compare it to being a father. Because being a father is a shit job that under no circumstance or possible way would you ever accept that job description. You know, I've got a 26, a 23, I think she's 23, she hates me, and an 18-year-old. And the mood swings that kids go through, there's times in your life you go, why am I here just to be a doormat? You're not being paid. You're not getting any rejoice. But when you're a businessman, you close that contract, or you make enough money and I can buy that car, or I can buy that bike, or I can go out and I've got the esteem. And oh, look at me, I've got an article. And all of that shit, you've got these kind of grades. So you can go, okay, I achieved that. Yeah. I'm obviously a good businessman. Hey, I've just been asked to be on Jon's podcast. I'm obviously doing something good. But you get no reward or accolades or medals or any media for being a good father. Yes. So how do you check that, hey, I'm doing something right?
You know, a lot of it for me is being around other great men that affirm what I'm doing is powerful. You know, bringing both the dark and the light to my men's group, the people that I'm in community with. All right, so because this would be the third time we brought up his name, but I meet with a group every month for 2 hours. The same group of guys for the last 5 years now. We've done this. Hal Elrod, Tim Nikolai, Justin Donald, and Dane Espegard. We meet together and we talk about the highs and the lows of fatherhood. One of the things that's great about that group is that, you know, this is my, when I get a high five, it's from those guys. And when I have somebody call me on my shit, it's from those guys. It is my sounding board for what I'm doing as a father. And what's also great is watching other people with their kids. To me, that's amazing, because not only do I see areas where I'm like, I'm doing a better job, but also I see areas where I can be excelling. And so it is community. I believe that community is the greatest survival tool. It is the greatest, it's the greatest place for us to go experience life. And that's really what we're talking about. What we get out of our businesses, you know, it's because we get feedback. And we don't always get it from our children the way we want. So I source it from other men. I have it with other men in my community.
But you said the good and the dark. Yeah. Now, as every entrepreneur, we've almost got to a situation now where we use it as an achievement, but we'll sit there and go, well, God, I was broke 5 times. And oh my God, my back was up against the wall. I was bankrupt. I was sued, but I pulled this out. And it's all that kind of strife and success story. We will openly talk about our dark moments. But if you turn around and you go, oh my God, I feel as though I'm a shit dad. Oh my God, being a parent. And I was actually having this conversation with Susie Aslam Kassan's wife. Yes. There is a shame about admitting how tough being a parent is.
Yeah.
But you've got a group there which you can actually walk into and you can go, it ain't working well for me, fellas. You know, I'm trying to get through to them and it ain't working. So what can we do about breaking that shame and being open? We'll talk about our failures in business, but oh my God, there's a real shame in actually saying, I don't know if I'm a good dad.
Yeah, well, a lot of it is the container that you have, the safety that you have amongst other men, because part of why it's hard for me to get totally open and vulnerable about my marriage or my children on a podcast or online or in blogs or however you're communicating with the world is because I'm also representing them. I have to expose part of their world in order to have an honest conversation, right? So if I tell you about a problem I'm having with my wife, I now am taking her life and putting it out online, which some of it I have her permission, some of it with my children I think is appropriate. And I do talk about it on my show. But when you've got a room that's locked in with these guys who are like, everything in this room stays in this room, people tend to open up. So during our in-person and our online events, the most important thing is to create confidentiality, because we have guys in the room that are wildly successful with big platforms and lots to lose from their business perspective if they at our last event, one of the things that we did is we had men open up and share secrets that they had never shared before with anybody. We create that level of safety where they can get it off their chest and be real in front of other men. That's the number one thing people say about our community is, I can't believe how vulnerable guys got here within 3 hours. I have a group of guys that I've been hanging out with for 10 years and we don't go that deep. I see them every week or every month and we never go that deep. So it's oftentimes inviting in or asking the men what you want from them and telling people this is why we're here. Our last event, things were topical. I heard the men, the conversations were topical, and I stopped the event right in the middle and I'm like, fuck this, guys. We're not here to do this bullshit, how's the weather type of conversation. And if you showed up here, you flew here, you arrived in this space to talk about something real. And then I asked my staff to leave the room. I had just the 50 men around me. I told them a story, Steve, that I won't tell you today because it involves another person. But I told a story and they were blown away that I revealed that much about my life. It was something about me. And immediately the whole group broke in a way. What I mean by that is they went and had conversations and everybody came back from that and said, we just went 8 levels deeper in this conversation because you led the way, Jon. You opened it up. You shared something so vulnerable. And let me say this last piece without ranting too long, is that, Steve, honestly, this idea about getting divorced, I've been married for 17 years. Dude, I might get divorced. I'm serious. Based on the conversation I just had with my wife an hour ago, I might talk to you next week and we might be divorced. Marriage is fucking hard.
Yeah.
And we have a counselor that we work with. We have been through, we're giving it our best, but I'm married to a Russian woman who I call the Russian assassin, who is no bullshit. We're both strong. We're both opinionated. We both do deep work. I mean, I could tell you all about it, right? Her work, my work, we're in it, but we're not holding any punches. We're honest. And we have a passionate relationship too. There's some great shit there. But, and a week ago, maybe not even 5 days ago, I slammed on the brakes of my car, damn near killed the dog, yanked both of my boys out of the car, and unleashed on them. And I'm not saying that as a moment to be proud. I'm saying I lost my shit on both my boys. I'm 48 years old. I'm the leader of a dad's group. I have been to 15 retreats, hundreds of online events, interviewed 400 men. I have the best experts at my fingertips. I've done plant medicine journeys and therapy and all the shit. I've done so much, and yet I still wrestle. I still lose it. I still have problems. I still, and sometimes there's even more shame with that, Steve, because I'll go, what the Jon, you are literally, are you the slowest of the group? You have access to more shit than anybody. And what is wrong with you that you can't pull this together? And I've brought that to my men. I've brought that same point to the men. And I'll tell you what, man, there's so much of that goes on. Guys going, what do I have to complain about? I'm rich. I have cars. I have houses. I have children that love me. I have a wife that loves me. Why am I being such a bitch about all this stuff? And that is really when you talk about shame, man, that is at the core of so much of this for these guys, because they're capable. The people in our group are highly capable, talented dudes. It's hard, man. It's really hard. If we're being honest, right? It's hard.
Oh, we need to be honest, because we're the alphas. We go out there and there's no stage we can't slay. There's no business meeting we can't conquer. There's no problem that we can't solve. And we get home and our kids will give us a side eye and it'll throw us up the wall. I can be in a pub and I can not get riled up by people wanting to have a fight with me. And if they want to have a fight with me, fine, we'll go toe to toe. But my daughter, she'll make one comment and my insides will twist. And
Yes.
there's just a way that those closest to you, they know your buttons. But again, as the alphas, we're supposed to conquer everything, but we can't have a conversation. I want to bring a few things up, but before we get into our next part of it, how can people get more news on this, more idea, follow you? What's the best place for people to go and find out about Front Row Dads?
Best is to listen to the podcast. It's under the name Front Row Dads. Go listen to that show. There's some really vulnerable conversations there. Great men opening up about what's working, what's not. That's the first place. And then if somebody really wants to go all in, go to the website, join the group. There's an application, fill it out. We'll have somebody call you. We'll see if it's a good fit. We'll tell you all about it. But it's a community like many others. It's just very intentional about who we're after. And what we want is solid men. We want men that choose to put their families first, that want to kick ass. We want you to be rich. We want you to do all the things. Be famous around the world, but first be famous at home. And that's what we want from our group.
I remember Garrett Ganderson. I don't know. Have you come across Garrett Ganderson?
Oh yeah, man. He did a comedy bit at our last live event in Austin. He's great.
Yeah, he is. And I remember him doing a speech at Genius Network once.
Yeah.
And he was doing, he turned around and the conversation was he was driving in his car and his wife turned around and she said, "You're a great businessman. You're a great provider and you're a good dad."
Mm-hmm.
And it hit him that, we strive for being these masters of the universe, but it's very, very tough. Now, I want to ask you, what's the feedback you get from the wives?
Yeah. Well, it depends, and it really varies. But if I'm just talking about the ones that like warm your heart, dude, let me think about a specific one. Even 2 or 3 weeks ago, there was a group of guys here in Austin. We have it's a big hub for the Front Row Dads. We have like 50 guys here. But there was a group of dads, some of the guys names you would know, they're all getting together. They've got their families, in somebody's home celebrating a birthday or whatever. But the dads are all outside and they're having a water balloon fight with the kids. And some of the wives made the comments that that's very unique to this group, where you'll have these really successful guys that kick ass in their business, but they're not just sitting around on the couch trying to avoid the kids talking about their next big launch, but they're outside throwing the water balloons around, being engaged, where a lot of times that's just the mom's role. Moms handle everything with the kids, but not here. The dads are very engaged in their families. They're true leaders. That's the way I want it to be. That's the way it should be. A lot of dads are afraid. They're like, there's almost this they wear it like, talk to your mom. She's the boss. And it's like, no, that's not fucking true. She has power. Yes, she should, be a leader in the family too in her unique way, but don't outsource everything to the mom either. Ask your mom, she's the boss. Bullshit.
What about the cool uncle syndrome? This is one that pisses me off that I've never been able to grasp. You could be talking to your kids about something and trying to educate them. And you and I, we get to mingle around with some of the most powerful intellects in the planet. Yes. And there's not a problem that we couldn't really just pick up our phone and phone a master at solving that problem. So we're trying to install in our kids the answer in something, and they blank us. They're not listening. Yet they'll speak to one of our friends who doesn't know what they're talking about, will say a comment, and they'll go, Joey said this. It's brilliant. And you're like, I just spent an hour trying to explain that to you. So being a father is, in a lot of situations, a very, very unrewarding position. And I will say it's probably even worse for the mums. Me and my wife, we'll sometimes sit there and we'll scratch our heads and go, well, that was a tough day. We're glad we got through that. Yeah. But you've got to keep going. I can't help thinking that the wives and mums out there must be quite happy that there is a space where we can openly go, this is a shit job. And sometimes I think I should be fired from it.
Yeah.
But being in a place where you can be vulnerable today, that's got to be very rewarding for the guys, and especially of the magnitude that they're dealing with that are in your group.
So let me speak to this rich uncle thing, because this is key. And what I want is, I want to create an environment where my kids have uncles. Like, we call
Oh yeah.
Hal Uncle Hal. And the kids understand that there's like your chosen family, your given family. And when we say uncle, that's a term of endearment to say this is a really important person in your life, right? So we want that to be the case. I know that to be true because I felt it with my own uncle, my Uncle John. Years ago, I was 16. I was fucking up big time, and he wrote me a letter. Dude, I never forgot that letter. He wrote that letter to me, and it hit me. It was one page, but I felt that letter. That letter changed me. You know, he didn't say many words to me throughout my life. We didn't live in the same area. We didn't hang out a lot. I went fishing with him a couple times, but he wrote me a letter that changed my life. And it called me up as a man. And it was cool to get it from him, that he took the time to do it. So, Steve, here's a great idea for all the guys out there that have young men. We need rites of passage programs in our life. We need that, that rite of passage. When my son was 13, I had 13 men in his life write him letters. Mm. And no kidding, a mutual friend of ours, Jon Vroman's letter is hanging above Tiger's bed right now as we speak. I could walk down there and show you with the camera. Vroman's letter is right there. And crazy enough, Vroman wrote that letter 8 feet from where I stand right now on my office deck. When I asked him, would you be one of the 13 men to write a letter to my son for his 13th birthday? I bought him a leather binder. I put all the letters in there and he read them. And, in the moment, his response is kind of lackluster. I was like, how are the letters? He's like, good. But I know that they sunk in, man. The fact that he hung them up in his room, the fact that he's referenced those letters, that's the other thing we got to keep in mind is sometimes you'll say something and you don't get the response like you would from a client. Like, oh my God, that just blew my mind. You tripled my business. That type of response. Kids, but the message, if you keep showing up as a dad, if you keep doing the thing you know is right, it is getting through. They will tell the story one day. They will remember those moments.
Yeah, it's. I'm very fortunate to work with my son Henry, and there were many times when, as a kid, we didn't see eye to eye, and there was all that kind of stuff, and now we actually share a business together,
That's
and
cool.
It's really good. But you don't know, and I've heard him have conversations with people, or conversations have got back to me that he's had when he spoke about things that we've spoken about 10 years ago. When you think they're not really paying attention, you think they're not listening, they've got all the bravado in the world, but it's sinking in. It's just maybe not, you're just not maybe seeing it. So if someone's out there and they are having troubles with their kids, or they woke up to a point where they go, well, hang on a minute, this is important. And I can make more money, but I can't make more hours with my kids. Yeah. And the kids, it's the classic 18 summers. You're going to get 18 summers if you're lucky. 3 or 4 of those are not going to bloody remember. So you've got to make each one count.
Yeah.
What do people do when they're in that situation?
Well, first of all, Jim Shields was at our first ever retreat in 2016 when I got 30 guys together to talk about fatherhood. He wrote the book. If somebody's listening to this and they want to connect with their kids, the book is called The Family Board Meeting, and his company is called 18 Summers. And he's just a great dude. He does retreats in Costa Rica at his home, and just solid human. So I love that. And I think that my answer, which I sound like a broken record all the time, is to lean into community, to lean into the conversation, for men to first lead themselves and then lead their families. And what I want men to do is to be brave and step in and make mistakes, to be brave and step in and connect, because it's messy as shit when you do it. But if you don't, the consequence is so high that the answer to almost every challenge a father faces, the answer in almost every scenario is lean in. I want to share something that's like heartbreaking. There was a man I interviewed on the podcast who lost his 14-year-old son to suicide. Heartbreaking story. And he made it his mission to address the teen suicide subject. He made a movie about it. And what he shared with me stuck. He said, when we interviewed kids under 18 who had tried to commit suicide but failed, and then we said, what do you wish your parents would have done? The answer was push harder. I wish my parents would have leaned in more, been more engaged, push harder. It's counterintuitive to this, like, well, I'm just going to let them be kids and natural consequences. And of course, the answer, Steve, is always yes and. Everything is context. Everything's based on your situation. Everything is a little bit of both. Yes, there's a time to let go. Yes, there's a time to hold on. But the answer if I came up with one answer for all parents at the end of my 8-year research project here, hundreds of interviews, lots of events, lots of one-to-one conversations with men, it is simply that in every scenario to lean in, to get engaged, to ask the big questions, to open up about where you're struggling, and to show up day and day and day after day. That's the answer in almost every scenario.
That's a tough one. To outlive your family is something that should never happen.
Yeah.
It's just ridiculous.
Brutal.
Giving a shout out to Jim Shields. I was actually at Genius Network, Joe Polish, in Marriott, up in New York. And I realized that there was so much intelligence within the room. I actually went up and I spoke and I said, look, there's so much intelligence in this room, but you're all freaking old and you're all going to die. Where's the youth? Why don't we have a Genius Network kids? Why don't we have an environment where the kids could be in this room talking and listening to these great people? And I got away from that, Mike. And Jim was there. And at the time he was there with his partner, Brian. And they turned around and went, that's what we do at board meetings.
Yeah.
And I'll be open. He said, we take one father or one parent and one sibling. And then we get them to connect on an entrepreneurial spectrum. And I was like, yeah, that sounds great. And he offered me a ticket and I blew it off. And then I went back to the following year and I was moaning at someone that, again, we had no youth. And again, it was another Genius Network event. And Jim turned around and said, we offered you the ticket, and you blew us off. If we offer it to you again, you're going to do the same? And I went, no, I'll come. And I was kind of like a little bit. And my son was the one that was going to blow it off. The night before, he was so committed to school and getting straight A's, he didn't want to miss school. Wow. And he had a bit of a breakdown. And I said, no, I've given my word I'm going to be there. And I will give grace forever to Jim and Brian, because without going to that board meeting and getting us to be able to connect at that level, we wouldn't be working together. We wouldn't have. We went to the event differently than where we came back. So wherever you need to get it from, get it. Right. Get vulnerable, get into the group. And if you can't join John's, who's basically the masterclass of being vulnerable and open, then maybe just get a bunch of dads together and go, look,
that's it.
Leave the bravado, leave the ego. Being a dad can fucking suck sometimes. And I think I'm a C-class dad. How can we get to a B? How can we get better at being it? I think you've got to reach out. I'm impressed that you do what you do. I only heard, and I hear about you from Hal, and I hear about you from Custom all the time. So I'm really pleased at what you're doing. And again, for people to find out about you, it's best to go through the podcast first.
Yep. Front Row Dads, and then frontrowdads.com is the website.
Well, thank you very much for allowing successful business people, to put their hands up and go, hey, I'm a great business person, but I want to be an even better father. And as you do, leading with husband and father before your business accolades, which are secondary to your family.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, I want to win in all of it. I just don't want to make sure that my success in business is not at the expense of my family.
Brilliantly said. Jon, thank you very much for coming on the show today. And thanks for putting the group together. I look forward to crossing paths more often.
Thanks, brother. Enjoyed the chat.
Cheers. Well, that was another episode of the Art of Making Things Happen podcast with me, your host, Steve Sims. If you like it, you know the scoop. Subscribe, tell your friends, share it around. Let them get benefit from this juice. And of course, if you want to change the room you're in, join Sims Distillery. Jump over to stevedsims.com/Sims Distillery, or you can find a link directly from that website. That's the room where creative disruptors get together to actually help each other become better. If you've got standards or you want higher standards, join the right room. See you next time.